Hi, I'm Jamie Kale Miller of Pandora Astrology, and in this video today, I'm going to tell you all about the eclipses of autumn 2024. I want to begin with a word about eclipses themselves. Eclipses are full and new moons that happen every 6 months. So a solar eclipse is built upon a new moon, and it's a new moon that happens right near the north and south nodes. A, a lunar eclipse is when full moon happens near the north and south nodes. The north and south nodes are not real physical points. They are mathematically calculated points that have to do with the intersection of two plates in the sky, two planes. So you have the Earth and the Earth's path around the sun. That's one plate. And the other one is the moon's path around the Earth, which lines up with that somewhat, but not entirely. And so they kind of intersect, and there will be one point in which they connect, and then opposite to it, there'll be another point at which they connect, whichever one of these points falls in the northern hemisphere is called the north node. Whichever one falls in the southern hemisphere is called the south node. And if all of that made no sense to you, don't worry. It's not essential for understanding what I have to tell you today. That's just for the astronomy geeks out there who want an explanation of what the nodes actually are. So the north and south nodes are really interesting astrological points that carry us beyond this life alone. The south node in your chart natally will speak to your karmic past life experiences that you've had, past life wisdom that you've gained, and what may be carrying over from those lives into this one. The north node is the opposite to that, and it speaks to your karmic future, karma that you may be creating in this life that will carry forward into a future one, or even good karma that you're building that may come back to you in the future. So these meanings of the north and south node are going to be important when it comes to looking at eclipses, because the eclipses are always connected to the nodes. That's what makes them eclipses. And so thinking about which node the eclipse is near is an important part of interpreting the eclipse itself. So as I mentioned, eclipses happen about every 6 months, and they happen when the new or full moon coincides with a node. And therefore the nodes will travel, along the signs as well. And the eclipses will have a tone according to where the nodes are right now. They spend about 18 months passing along a given pair of signs. Right now, the nodes are in Aries and Libra. Right now, the north node is in Aries and the south node is in Libra. So this means something about us collectively as humanity here on the earth, that we are collectively in the practice right now of letting go of some of our bad, old, lingering karmic habits that are Libran in nature. And we are supposed to embrace more Aries traits. So, what this means is that everybody is in the process of learning how to be maybe less polite. Maybe I'm talking about the South Node in Libra now, and caring less what other people think of you, needing other people's opinion before acting too much, being maybe overly socially self-aware or self-conscious. And to embrace the North Node in Aries means to become more assertive, more direct, to know your own will with more clarity and pursue it with stronger action. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody is supposed to, stop being civilized and take up arms. Not at all. It's about correcting old imbalances and proceeding forward in a way that is modulated by the old. So the best response for somebody who is habitually too polite is to become more assertive. And the best response for somebody who is habitually too assertive is to modulate that assertion with some politeness. But still, the forward direction is assertion. So that theme is going to play out in these eclipses that I'm going to tell you about today. So when I analyze an eclipse, what do I notice? What are the main features of an eclipse? Well, first of all, whether it is a lunar or a solar eclipse. A lunar eclipse, which is an eclipse of the moon, we see the moon's face gets hidden during the eclipse, and that's because the sun is behind the earth, casting the earth's shadow onto the moon, and therefore the moon goes dark temporarily. That's what an eclipse is when it's a lunar eclipse. And so, because it's the moon being eclipsed, and because the moon is a principle of emotion, of feeling, of intuition, and inner life, inner worlds, that is what is affected the most during a lunar eclipse. So, lunar eclipses have a tendency to be really emotional. I've heard them called an emotional roto-rooter, and they really do stir things up emotionally, although you might not always see what is going on with someone around an eclipse because it's going on inside of them. And you might feel like other people can see what's going on with you around a lunar eclipse, but it's also quite possible that you're just experiencing it inwardly, and other people don't really see your experience. However, it's different with a solar eclipse. A solar eclipse, an eclipse of the sun, is a situation where the moon gets between the earth and the sun and covers up the sun from our view on earth. So it's not exactly where the moon casts a shadow over the sun, but it does kind of blot out the sun. The sun, as an astrological principle, is much more actional than the moon. And therefore, a solar eclipse is often attended by actions. And you can see it behaviorally on the person who is experiencing it. And that's one of the major differences between a solar and a lunar eclipse. So the point here is if you're going through a lunar eclipse, look to your inner life, look to your emotions, look to your feelings, and try not to overreact and get really stirred up or do anything based on those emotions that might be ill-conceived. If it is a solar eclipse, look to your behaviors because your behaviors are something that show outwardly. Other people might see your behavior during a solar eclipse. And again, it might take you down a bad path. So you really got to pay attention to your behavior during a solar eclipse. So that's the first feature to think about with an eclipse. Is it solar or lunar? Second feature to think about is how intense is it going to be? Is it going to be total or partial? Is it going to, and that's basically going to determine how intense it is. If it's a total eclipse, it's going to be much more strong. Also, if it's visible in the region where like if you can actually see the eclipse at the time of day that it's happening in your region, it's likely to have a stronger effect on you. But my point here is if the eclipse is total, it will be more potent. If it's partial, less potent. And you want to really consider that when you're thinking about how to respond to an eclipse. Now, the third thing to consider is which node is this eclipse based on? Is it based on the north node or the south node? So you want to look for the eclipsed thing. If it's a solar eclipse and the sun is being eclipsed, which node is the sun near? Is it near to the north node or the south node? And if it's a lunar eclipse, and so the moon is being eclipsed, where is the moon? Is that near the north or the south node? If the eclipsed thing is near the south node, then watch out for old karma to come up and bite you in the butt. This is a releasing eclipse, and you need to take a look around your life for bad old karmic habits, which you might think are actually talents or gifts that you have, but which are actually holding you back. And this is a really powerful occasion for releasing them. Maybe because it's a lunar eclipse and some big emotions got stirred up, or maybe because it's a solar eclipse and you did some behavior representative of your bad old karmic habits and other people noticed. Now, an eclipse that happens at the North Node is an initializing eclipse. It can begin a whole new set of life themes that you'll be living into in future lives. It can also carry or spread karma into the future, and you actually get to be the decider of what kind of karma that is. Is it karmic debt where you just did something, badly behaved, and so you're going to owe somebody in the future because of that? Or is it, good karma that you're banking for the future? That you're actually investing, where you did something great for somebody, and they'll want to pay you back in a future life, and that'll feel lucky at the time when it happens, and you will never know why. But that's some of why lucky things happen, is because there are people around you all the time that owe you something karmically and are looking for a way to pay it back. So a North Node eclipse is a great opportunity to bank some good karma for yourself in the future. And you can do that by behaving or feeling, depending on the type of eclipse, in accord with where the North Node is and what its themes are. In this case, Aries. Now, I just told you 3 things to notice about an eclipse, but there's a little bit more. One is you want to think about why this eclipse might be intense for you or less intense for you. And the way that you can know that is if you have something in your chart, especially if it's something major, like your sun, your moon, or your rising, or your midheaven, and that thing is really close to the eclipse or in a powerful aspect to it within about 5 degrees. And the more precise it is, the more intensely you're going to feel that eclipse. And then in that case, you really should pay attention to it. So I'm going to tell you about these features of an eclipse in the eclipses that are coming this season. And I'm also going to describe each eclipse's shadow agents. A shadow agent is the phrase that I like to use for any planets that are involved in the eclipse. Any planets that happen to be within 5 degrees of the eclipse's degree and that connect with it, powerfully and form powerful aspects to it. So I'll be telling you what those planets are and what meaning they lend to the eclipse in question. And here are the charts for both of 2024's autumn eclipses. So let's begin with the lunar eclipse in Pisces coming on September 17th of 2024. I'm calling this one Dreamer versus Blowhard for reasons that'll become apparent shortly. But I just want to point out the features first. This is a lunar eclipse. We know this because it's built on a full moon. We have the sun here at 25 degrees of Virgo, opposite to the moon at 25 degrees of Pisces. And with that moon, we see the North Node. So this is a lunar eclipse, and it is also an initializing eclipse. Remember, I said that a lunar eclipse is always a full moon, and therefore it does tend to have a relational dynamic, which I'll say more about shortly. This eclipse has a low potency. This is a partial eclipse, and therefore its potency is not that strong. It's kind of weak, actually. And as to whether this eclipse is going to impact you in a strong way, look to anything that you have in 25 degrees of mutable signs. And I'll show you some birthdays where your sun sign, your sun, would be pretty strongly impacted by this eclipse. The shadow agents in this eclipse involve Neptune right here with that moon in Pisces. Also, in a square to this eclipse, we have Jupiter right here in Gemini, forming a 90-degree angle to the sun-moon opposition. And we also have some really great harmony involved here, with Uranus forming a sextile to the eclipsed moon and Pluto doing the same from over here in Capricorn. So I've given this one the title of Dreamer versus Blowhard. Now, anytime you have the moon in Pisces, you're going to have a very dreamy mood. Dreamy, otherworldly, spiritual, fantastical, imaginary, artistic, and that's very moon in Pisces. And this moon being with the North Node does suggest this is the direction to go in. This moon is placed opposite the sun in Virgo right here. And so this is built on the opposition that every full moon is, which implies a quality of tug of war involved with this moon, and also makes it really ripe for projection. If you are impacted by this eclipse, you may find yourself feeling like you identify with that moon in Pisces, and somebody in your life is taking on the role of that sun in Virgo, or it may happen in reverse. You may feel that you identify with that sun in Virgo, and that somebody in your life is taking on the role of the moon in Pisces. So when we think about this opposition between Pisces and Virgo, Pisces, as I said, is very dreamy, kind of otherworldly, fantastical, imaginative, spiritual, even artistic, definitely more chaotic and boundaryless, kind of foggy, spacey. Whereas Virgo is precise, is practical, is grounded in the physical, is detail oriented, meticulous, hardworking, humble. And so the dichotomy there is that you might feel like, wow, I'm a space cadet, and this person over here is trying to police me and correct me, and they're being very judgmental towards me. So you could easily feel that way during this eclipse. Or you might find that you identify with that sun in Virgo and you're just kind of trying to keep the ship righted, and somebody in your life has taken on the role of that moon in Pisces, and they're just stirring up all kinds of emotional chaos and crossing all kind of boundaries and just being really hard to handle. And the addition of that Neptune right there with the moon just makes it even more of that Neptune Pisces feel, because Neptune rules Pisces. And so more of that feel of like chaos and disorder and like mystery, and even a little bit of like feeling like you're kind of in a state of suspended animation, like you're in a holding pattern, like you're in a waiting period. And there's something that you're waiting for, but you don't even know what it is necessarily, or how long the wait will be. But it just kind of feels like things are all just kind of like frozen in time. And there may be a feeling of timelessness about it while you're involved with this eclipse. That may be part of the set of feelings that come over you during this eclipse. So that moon in Pisces is clearly the dreamer in this equation, but who's the blowhard? It's that Jupiter right there in Gemini. Jupiter is the big personality in our skies, definitely too big for his britches at times, and presently traveling the sign of Gemini, which is not very comfortable. I like to think of Jupiter in Gemini as like, a big guy wearing a suit that's too small because he's trying to look like he's lost some pounds, but he hasn't lost them. And Jupiter does have a tendency to kind of suck all the air out of the room. And so there's conflict here because this Jupiter squares the sun moon axis and also Neptune, although just barely. So Jupiter is a shadow agent. And just let me be a little bit more clear about shadow agent. Like a shadow agent is a piece of an eclipse or a factor in an eclipse that is trying to show you your shadow. The whole thing about eclipses is that they're based on shadows. They're about stuff being hidden and then coming to light. And so an eclipse is a time to look at your own shadow material, and the planets involved with an eclipse are factors, and sometimes they show up as people in your life that want to show you your shadow. So this Jupiter can show up as shadow material or as a side of yourself where you don't always behave your best, but instead you spout your opinions and don't listen to anybody else and lecture instead of converse. Or this might be somebody that you know that pops up during the eclipse for you. So one part of this eclipse is caught up in resolving this dilemma between the cerebral and opinionated Jupiter in Gemini, as opposed to the dreamy and intuitive Moon-Neptune combination. And that may come up, inside you and just get very stirred up during this eclipse. Now, there is some serious help involved in this eclipse in the form of Uranus and Pluto, both of which form harmonious connections to that moon. Pluto sextiles it. That means it forms a 1/6 angle. It is 1/6 of the circle away from the moon. Uranus is the same on the other side, 1/6 of the circle away from the moon. Now, Uranus brings a change of your mind. Uranus brings a new idea that can cause you to think differently about something. In this case, Uranus may offer practical ideas. He is, after all, traveling through Taurus. Uranus may offer practical ideas that help you to get a grip on those emotions and that help to anchor you when you're in that state of like, oh, I'm feeling these things and it feels like I've been feeling them forever and kind of caught up in a dream or a trance. And oh, how do I get out of this? Uranus is here to help and can introduce a new idea that is like dropping a lifeline into your state of mind, your trance, if you will, and can enable you to pull yourself out of it. Now, Pluto over here is helpful as well, but in a different way. Whereas Uranus is really cerebral and heady, Pluto is visceral and gut oriented. So Pluto brings transformation and metamorphosis, and Pluto will demand that you purge and let go and release and allow something to die off so that you can be liberated from it. So Pluto is introducing that kind of help to the moon and whispering to the moon, what can you let go of that will help your feeling state to smooth out right now? So just to summarize, the best response to this eclipse is to really notice what you're feeling during this eclipse. Allow the pot to be stirred somewhat and notice that your feelings are getting stirred up. Balance them with the practical and take the practical help of Uranus with maybe a new idea that can cause you to think differently about how you're feeling. And take the practical help from Pluto and consider what you could release and let go of attachment to that would help your emotional state to subside. And while all that is going on, and it is a lot, try not to get into arguments with the blowhards in your life. And especially try not to let them invalidate what you're feeling or crush your intuition or overwhelm you with their hot air. And if this eclipse aspects something really strongly in your own chart, especially if that thing is an important thing like your sun, your moon, or your rising, then you definitely should consider taking my advice during this eclipse. By the way, if you're enjoying this video and getting value from it, please be sure to like it right now before you forget. Subscribe to this Pandora Astrology channel for more good stuff like this, and here's why. I am an experienced astrologer in private practice for more than 30 years in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I love sitting down with clients like you who want to improve your life through self-awareness and awareness of what's going on in our skies. So consider having a reading with me, and you can find me at the link in the description below. But for now, let's get back to the video. Let's focus now on the solar eclipse in Libra right here coming up October 2nd, 2024. And this is the title I chose for it. Choose words that don't inflame. And the reason for that will become apparent. So this is a solar eclipse, which means that it's built on a new moon, and you can see it right here. A new moon is a conjunction of the sun and the moon. They are together in the sky, and they get as close as it's possible for them to get. 10 degrees of Libra is where they land. This is a releasing eclipse because it conjuncts the south node. It is in Libra, and so it's going to have a strongly Libran tone. And it is going to draw on the South Node in Libra stuff that I was talking about before. This is an annular eclipse, so its strength is kind of medium. Not super potent, but also not very weak either. Definitely perceivable. A solar eclipse, by the way, is based on this conjunction, and so it's inherently more self-absorbed and less relational than the opposition that is inherent in the lunar eclipse that I showed you a minute ago. So solar eclipses always have a little bit more self-absorbed of a tone. The fact that this is a releasing eclipse placed near the south node means that you can clear karma from the past during this eclipse. The fact that it is a solar eclipse means it is actional and behavioral, and that you will see your shadow in terms of how you behave. So you may do something, you may take an action that other people can also experience during this eclipse, which reveals some aspect of yourself that you don't like to look at every day. That's what the shadow is. It's a concept from Jungian psychology that has to do with all that stuff that we put aside, shove in the closet, tamp down, don't want to look at every day, but which pops out every once in a while and really needs to be looked at periodically. Eclipses are a time when that stuff comes to the surface and forces us to look at it. The shadow agents in this eclipse, well, there's several of them. We have Mercury right here with the eclipse next to the moon and sun. And then we have squares to Ceres over here in Capricorn and Mars over here in Cancer. And all of that stuff is pretty stressful. Mercury less so, but Ceres and Mars definitely quite stressful. And then we have some help from this over here, which is Pallas Athena, placed again at a sextile or 60 degrees away from the eclipse. So this eclipse is based on the south node right here in Libra. And remember I said that the south node in Libra has to do with drawing too much on past life wisdom and talent gained in civilized situations. South Node in Libra represents things like manners, etiquette. Like in past lives, we've all had practice at manipulating based on our physical attractiveness, persuading other people to do what we want based on how cute we are. So South Node in Libra is going to bring in some of those shadow themes to this eclipse. And it being a solar eclipse, it's going to show in behavior. So if this eclipse is impacting you strongly, you may behave in a way that is just too cute by half. In other words, you may draw on some old past life knowledge of how to get the best of someone in a situation based on how polite you are, how wheedling you are, how cute you are, how attractive you are, or, how much you can use diplomacy. Now, if this is driven by shadow, then it's going to be a manipulation. And you might get caught out in that manipulative behavior, and it might really make it hard for you to progress. In other words, you can blow it. So Mercury is here as a shadow agent. Mercury is the communicator and messenger. So this eclipse might be attended not only by, sweet but manipulative behaviors, but also sweet but manipulative words and evasions. So watch out for those kinds of behaviors too, because they're probably not actually helping you move forward. They may just be a bad old habit, and they may really be holding you back. Now, the title here that I've chosen is Choose Words That Don't Inflame. And there's a reason for that, which is mostly to do with this Mars over here. Mars is the warrior, the hero, the athlete, the driven, forceful, willful side of us. Mars is very much about self-determination, but Mars also tends to bring conflict. Mercury square Mars in the first place does tend to signal arguments, pressure, forceful conversations, or trying to overwhelm someone with words, or using words like swords in battle. So under this eclipse, it is so important to not behave in ways that could be construed as verbally abusive. And ask yourself, what's underneath your behavior and what's underneath your words? Do you just want what you want and you'll do any form of manipulation in order to get it? Or are you willing to have a rational, grounded debate and to spar on more of a level playing field? And here's where we bring in Ceres. Ceres here balances that Mars, brings in a much more grounded feel. And also Ceres is here to remind you to check in with your body and see how is your body experiencing any interactions that you have under this eclipse with other people. Ceres is definitely here as an antidote to the inflammation that Mars can bring. And then the last piece I want to mention is Pallas Athena right here, bringing a harmonious nature to this eclipse by sextiling the sun and moon. Pallas Athena is a wise woman, and she is about balancing strength with softness, feminine with masculine, and she's in Sagittarius, so she brings in some tolerance as well. So Pallas Athena is here to smooth over the negotiations, bring in a little bit of fire so that there can be some healthy assertion, but also to do it in a balanced way. And as I said, I've named this eclipse Choose Words That Don't Inflame, and that has a lot to do with the position of Mars here and the way it squares Mercury and that North Node in Aries. But, other ways to look at it might be you might call this one careful communication amidst inflamed emotions. Those emotions could be happening inside you or in somebody else. And it's just important that you not act on inflamed emotions during this eclipse. And another way to look at this eclipse might be common sense and that Ceres versus emotional dominance. And that has a lot to do with this Mars over here. So if this eclipse lands on something important in your chart, like your sun, your moon, your rising, or something else that's important to you in your chart, then look to your behavior during this eclipse and let your behavior be releasing old bad habits instead of taking on new ones. So now I want to talk about how long do eclipses last and when do we feel their impact and when do we feel it the most? If an eclipse triggers something in your chart specifically, you should watch for its effects for several days leading up to it. And then most potently at the day and time of the eclipse, as listed on the charts that I showed you and translated to your own time zone, of course. And then also for another day or so after the eclipse. It's pretty contained like that in just a few days. However, there's also an echo that tends to happen 3 months later on the same type of moon as the eclipse that triggered you. For example, the lunar eclipse full moon in Pisces, which happens September 17th, will have an after echo at the full moon in Gemini of December 15th, 2024. And that happens in the afternoon in Pacific time. It'll be, different in your zone, perhaps. And then the solar eclipse in Libra of October 2nd will have an after echo at the new moon in Capricorn of December 30th, 2024, again in the afternoon in my time zone in Pacific, but your time zone may vary. Now I want to show you some birthdays that will feel the September lunar eclipse at 25 degrees of Pisces the most keenly. If you have anything at all between 20 and 29 degrees of a mutable sign, you're going to feel this moon. You'll also feel it if you have something in 0 degrees of a cardinal sign. And if you were born in around these birth dates specifically, your natal sun is going to feel this eclipse strongly. So March 15th would be the central and most powerfully impacted date. But if you were born up to 5 days before that or after that, you would feel it just more intensely the closer your birthday is to March 15th. And the same is true for June 16th, September 17th, and December 16th. Now, when it comes to the solar eclipse in Libra, if you have anything placed between 5 and 15 degrees of a cardinal sign, you're going to feel this moon. And if your birthday falls close to any of these dates listed here, you're going to feel this eclipse keenly. And the closer it is to the center point of this 10-degree, 10-day span, the more you're going to feel it. So if you were born really close to October 2nd, like if that is your birthday, then this eclipse is going to really land with you like a ton of bricks. And you could still be born on October 7th and feel it somewhat, or 5 days before October 2nd. And the same is true for these other dates right here. December 31, March 30, and July 1st. If you have anything at all between 20 and 29 degrees of a mutable sign, you're going to feel this moon. You'll also feel it if you have something in 0 degrees of a cardinal sign. And if you were born in around these birth dates specifically, your natal sun is going to feel this eclipse strongly. So March 15th would be the central and most powerfully impacted date. But if you were born up to 5 days before that or after that, you would feel it just more intensely the closer your birthday is to March 15th. And the same is true for June 16th, September 17th, and December 16th. Now, when it comes to the solar eclipse in Libra, if you have anything placed between 5 and 15 degrees of a cardinal sign, you're going to feel this moon. And if your birthday falls close to any of these dates listed here, you're going to feel this eclipse keenly. And the closer it is to the center point of this 10-degree, 10-day span, the more you're going to feel it. So if you were born really close to October 2nd, like if that is your birthday, then this eclipse is going to really land with you like a ton of bricks. And you could still be born on October 7th and feel it somewhat, or 5 days before October 2nd. And the same is true for these other dates right here. December 31, March 30, and July 1st. I hope you enjoyed this video about the eclipses of autumn 2024 as much as I enjoyed making it for you. And if you did, please like this video right now, subscribe to my channel, and tell all your friends about it. I put out news videos like this and horoscopes every month on my YouTube channel. And until next time, I'll see you around the cosmos. Bye-bye.